All right, so today we're looking at a submission, a political commentary transcript. It's analyzing the whole legal fight between Candace Owens and Turning Point USA.
Yeah.
It's a really high-energy piece. A lot of legal talk, character stuff. So let's just jump right into how the argument is actually built.
Okay, yeah. I've spent some time with this, and there's, a lot of fire in the delivery, for sure. But if we're looking at it through a structure and flow lens, the first thing that really trips me up, it's not even the politics, it's the pacing. Specifically, it's the tonal whiplash you get in the commercial breaks.
Oh, yes.
The jump from this really high-stakes talk about evil behavior to an ad for, of all things, masa chips, it just completely guts the seriousness of the commentary.
That moment stood out so vividly. Let's really look at, because the hosts are describing her behavior right before that ad. They're using words like evil, narcissistic, saying she's damaged a company.
The emotional intensity is dialed up to, like, a 10.
To a 10. And then, without even taking a breath, they pivot straight into a pitch for churro-flavored chips.
And chocolate hummus.
Right. It creates this real cognitive dissonance. 1 second, you're talking about a cult that's freaking batshit, and that's a direct quote from the text. And the next,
you're talking about dipping chips in Nutella.
Exact. And the weakness there is that this jarring shift, it just trivializes everything they just said. The accusations of defamation, the cult-like behavior.
It sort of signals to the audience that the evil isn't actually that serious. Yeah, if it can just be followed up by a snack endorsement, how serious could it be? It makes you question the authenticity of the anger,
Totally. If the host is genuinely that disturbed by the topic, the shift to, yum, these are delicious, feels almost robotic.
I want to push back on that just a little bit, though. We have to be realistic here. This is a podcast. They have bills to pay. Sponsors often want those high-energy reads. Do we think they're even aware of the clash, or is it just autopilot?
I think it has to be autopilot. They see ad read in the script, and a switch just flips. But that autopilot is really expensive, in terms of credibility. So, the suggestion here is to create some kind of rhetorical bridge.
A palate cleanser.
A palate cleanser, yeah. A moment before the ad read to just reset the emotional baseline.
No, you don't have to be depressed, but you have to acknowledge the shift. You need a rhetorical airlock. Acknowledge how intense the last segment was before you pivot to the commercial.
An airlock, that's a great way to put it. You have to validate where the listener is emotionally before you try and sell them something. You can't expect them to go from moral outrage to consumer hunger in half a second. So here's a concrete example. Instead of jumping straight into, but first we want to remind you about how delicious massive chips are, the host could try a segue. Something like, wow, that is a lot of heavy legal drama to digest, and frankly, it's exhausting. Let's just take a breath and switch gears for a second to talk about something actually enjoyable. Snack time.
See, that works. It works because it respects the gravity of what came before. It says to the audience, I know that was heavy, and I need a break from it too. It keeps the host's credibility, but it still meets the commercial obligation.
Right. It stops the evil commentary from just feeling like a setup for the ad.
Okay, so let's move on to the actual argument of the piece. They're trying to build a case that Owens is, in breach of contract and also morally bankrupt.
Yes, but if we're looking at this through a tone and style lens, there's this recurring theme, this reliance on derogatory label, and it really dilutes the strength of their factual legal arguments.
This is the central tension of the whole script for me, because the hosts have strong factual evidence. They cite the contract ending in December 2025. They have the name your price clip. They talk about the cease and desist. These are objective facts.
Facts that support their argument that she is, as they put it, legally cooked.
Yes. And yet throughout the whole thing, they keep interrupting the evidence to call her a C word or, imply it heavily, a demon, a narcissist.
And while that definitely appeals to their base, to people who already dislike her, it just weakens the objective argument. It turns it from a legal breakdown into like a personal vendetta.
It's a bit of a boy who cried wolf situation. You call someone a demon, and then your audience just tunes out the nuance of the contract law. But let me play devil's advocate for a second.
Okay.
Isn't that what their audience wants, that kind of red meat? If they stop the insults, do they risk losing the entertainment value?
That's a fair question. But if your whole goal is to critique a legal strategy, you have to decide what you want to be. Are you a heckler? Or are you an analyst? If you want to be taken seriously as a commentator on lawfare, the insults just get in the way. So the suggestion is pretty simple. Let the subject's own words do the work.
Show, don't tell.
Exactly. Use the show don't tell principle.
And the material gives them the perfect chance to do that. They don't need to add the insults because the clip of her saying it's God's platform does all the work for them.
All of it. When Owens says, it's not my platform actually, it's God's platform, that's a very specific rhetorical move she's making.
Right. She's insulating herself from criticism.
So here's an example of how you handle that differently. Instead of reacting with, she is such a narcissist, I want to say the C word, the host could actually analyze the language in the clip. They could say something like, notice how she reframes a standard breach of contract into a divine mission by saying it's God's platform. That rhetorical shift is how she insulates herself from legal reality.
That is so much stronger. It highlights the narcissism intellectually instead of just emotionally. It trusts the audience to be smart enough to see the arrogance without being told she is arrogant.
It turns this segment from just a vent session into like a psychological deconstruction, and it keeps the focus on the lawfare aspect they keep mentioning.
Speaking of strategy, that brings us right to the next big point, which is about deepening the analysis of her bluff. The script does a great job showing she's arrogant, but the critique of her name your price strategy feels a little surface level.
Yeah, let's look at that section. They react to her offer to buy out her own contract with just sort of shock at her ego. They say things like she's so full of herself or she thinks she can raise it overnight. They're just reacting to the emotion of the clip.
They're taking the bait.
They're totally taking the bait.
And by doing that, they miss the chance to really dig into why she's doing this. Is it a bluff? Is it a calculated move to force a public discovery process? By only focusing on their emotional reaction, the commentary misses the whole chess move aspect of the battle.
Exactly. If you just strip away the personality, what is actually happening? She is challenging a corporation to put a price tag on her silence. That's attack. So the suggestion is to pivot from reacting to her personality to analyzing the game theory. Treat her clips as evidence of a strategy, even if it's a bad one.
And they even have the perfect tool for this, right, in the script. They bring up the Macron lawsuit.
Right. They mention how in that case, she acted all tough girl, but then eventually just wanted the whole case dismissed.
Right. So for listeners who don't know, she basically challenged that lawsuit publicly, invited the fight, but then when it got close to the discovery phase, where you have to hand over emails and texts, she folded.
So the pattern is bark loud for the donors, but fold quiet for the lawyers.
Precisely. And the hosts know this. They reference it, but they don't quite tie the knot. The 2 points stay disconnected. The connection they make is just, she's two-faced, but they don't establish it as a strategic pattern. That could be so much stronger.
So here's a concrete way to deepen that. The hosts could explicitly contrast the two events to show that pattern. For example, she's using this name your price tactic to signal confidence to her donors, which is similar to what she did at the start of the Macron case. But history suggests this is a bluff to avoid actual litigation, and the weakness in her strategy is that it exposes her financial reliance on her base.
See, that provides value beyond just agreeing she's arrogant. It turns the commentary into a prediction model. It asks, if she did X before, and she's doing Y now, what's the likely outcome? That's real insight for the listener, not just shared outrage.
And it also engages the part of the audience that might be neutral on her. Even if you don't hate Candace Owens, you might be interested in whether her legal strategy is any good.
I think that's a crucial distinction. It moves the content from preaching to the choir to educating the observer. Keeps the show from just becoming an echo chamber.
Now let's talk about the audience interaction. There's this really interesting meta segment where they discuss listener feedback. And while it's a strong move for transparency, it lacks a justified conclusion.
This was a fascinating moment for me. The host mentioned that fans are pissed, and that's their word, because they want pop culture stuff. They want Taylor Swift and Blake Lively, not this legal drama. And the hosts admit this openly.
They do. They say, her fans were getting pissed. Tons of comments saying, that's not why I listen to you. But then they just keep going with the legal drama anyway.
And the weakness there is that they admit the audience is unhappy, but they don't justify why this story is important enough to override what their listeners want. So the disgruntled listeners feel heard, but then they just feel ignored.
It's like saying, we know you hate your vegetables, but we're serving them anyway without ever explaining why they're good for you.
That's a good point. But do you think maybe the hosts just implicitly think it's important? I mean, they clearly care about this story a lot.
Oh, they do, but they need to say that out loud for the Taylor Swift fan who's about to click off. So the suggestion is to explicitly justify the editorial choice. Explain why this specific development, the cease and desist, transcends the usual drama and enters territory that even pop culture fans should understand.
Right, because this isn't just politics. It's about influencer contracts, brand safety, how conflict gets monetized. Those themes apply directly to Taylor Swift or any other major celebrity.
Exactly. So here's how they could bridge that gap. After they mention the angry comments, the host could say something like, "We hear you on the Taylor Swift requests, but this isn't just political infighting. This is a case study on how influencers monetize conflict. Even if you hate politics, you need to see how the cult mechanic works here because it applies to pop culture too."
That creates a so what factor. It tells the Taylor Swift fan, hey, pay attention because the mechanics of this lawsuit explain the mechanics of the celebrity world you already care about. It turns the apology into a lesson.
And it validates their decision to stick with the story. The script even mentions that Owens used the Beckham fight and Taylor Swift on her own show to distract her audience. The hosts could use that. They could say, look, even she is using pop culture as a shield. We're here to show you what she's hiding behind it.
Perfectly. It makes the boring legal stuff directly relevant to the fun pop culture stuff.
Okay, I want to circle back to one thing about the tone. When they talk about the audience, they describe Candace Owens' cult as losers who just so desperately cling to her. They frame the donations as exploitation.
Yeah, they say her followers may not even be well off themselves, and yet they're making this woman infinitely more rich, which is actually a compassionate point, but it's buried under a pile of insults.
It is, and this brings us back to that opportunity to elevate the analysis. Instead of calling the followers losers, which just alienates anyone who might be on the fence, they could frame it as a consumer protection issue.
That's a really strong angle. If you frame it as, we are angry because she is taking money from people who can't afford it based on a lie, that changes the host from a hater into a whistleblower.
Exactly, and the text mentions listeners should ask for refunds. That's a specific call to action, but it gets lost in the noise of calling people batshit. If they just stripped away the insults and focused on the financial harm to the consumer, the argument would be bulletproof.
It's interesting because the hosts clearly have a lot of insider knowledge. They mentioned being part of the original thread where the non-disparity clause was first hypothesized. They have the receipts.
They do. They have that primary source credibility. They just need to trust that credibility enough to not resort to schoolyard tactics. When you have the truth on your side, like they claim to, you don't need to scream, you just need to present the documents.
That's really the core of it, isn't it? The material is so rich with evidence. The contract dates, the specific tweets, the video clips. The critique is really just about clearing away the clutter.
Right. The tonal whiplash of the ads, the ad hominem attacks, the kind of dismissive attitude towards the audience.
Clear all that away and let the evidence shine. It seems like the overarching theme here is discipline. They have the passion, they have the facts, but they lack the rhetorical discipline to organize it into a really weaponized argument. They're using a shotgun when they could be using a sniper rifle.
I love that analogy. They're just spraying fire everywhere. At the C word, at the cult, at the losers. But a targeted critique of the legal strategy and the financial manipulation would be so much more effective at dismantling the subject's credibility.
And it would probably help with audience retention too. If you treat your viewer as intelligent, they're more likely to stay through the heavy segments.
Okay, we are coming to the end of our review here. So, to recap the key takeaways for this submission. First, manage your commercial segue. Use a transition to separate heavy content from ad reads so you don't trivialize your own outrage.
Second, replace the name-calling with analytical deconstruction. Use the subject's own rhetoric against them instead of just applying labels. It keeps the focus on the argument, not the insult.
Third, treat the subject's outbursts as strategic moves that you can analyze. Pivot from, she's arrogant, to, what is the game theory behind this bluff?
And finally, justify your editorial choices. If you're going to cover a topic your audience says they hate, explain to them clearly why it matters to their interests. Don't just hear their feedback and then ignore it. These adjustments will really transform the commentary from just a vent session into a professional political analysis. We would encourage the listener to apply these lenses, specifically the show don't tell and these strategic analysis lenses, to their next piece.
Absolutely. We'd love to see how this evolves.
Please submit the revised version for a follow-up critique. We're really looking forward to seeing the growth. That's all for this critique.